Welcome to the 2000 Cubit Rule. I am your host, Mark Rowan, and we make room for God to move in our business, our ministry, and our life. That's really what the 2000 Cubit Rule is all about. Find out more when you read Joshua 3:4. That's the basis of all that. And we want to remind people, too, what we're here to help folks with. You'll see in my background, we talk about the metamorpho method. And so that's all about transforming the message that God has given you so that people can grab a hold of it and it can multiply the influence, impact that you have, and the calling that God has given you to get that message out to more people. So check that out. It's a five-step process. It's based on Habakkuk 2:2. So if you know that, it's about writing the vision, making it plain on tablets so that people, when they read it, they can then run with it. So that's a little bit of a hint of how we help folks. So check that out at metamorphomethod.com for more. And today we're so excited to host Bill Hennessy. He's also known as the Retirement Igniter. That's what he does. After 45 years of ministry and leadership, Bill now helps people over 50 discover their God-given purpose in that season. And he's been married to Marie for 45 years. Together, they have four children and six grandchildren. Well, Bill, welcome to the program. Glad to have you with us.
I'm excited to be with you. This has been something I've been looking forward to and can't wait to tell people about what God's doing amongst people in the over 50 range.
There you go. And I'm almost there. I've got one more year and I could start listening to what you have to say.
We could make you an honorary member.
That's exciting. Bill, you're doing your own podcast as well. So that's one of the things that you get to do is talk about these things, and we'll get a little bit more into that. But you didn't start out as a podcaster, I don't think. You had some other things were involved with over the past several years. So kind of give us a little background of what led you to today and what you're doing.
Sure. Well, I had kind of a train smash conversion when I was 16 years old. I met Jesus in a very reluctant way. I was about as opposed to God as I could possibly be. A guy in my high school came and told me that Jesus loved me. I told him to get out of my life. He kept coming at me. Finally, he challenged me to accept Christ by either turning away or turning to him. And he drove me to a big white church with a big white cross. And he said, Jesus Christ died on that cross for your sins and you don't. And if I could say it, he'd leave me alone. And I tried three times to say that, and I couldn't. And on the third time, I found myself down on my knees in a driving rain, accepting Christ. And in the very moment that I was on the road to being saved, God called me to be a preacher. And it made the two guys that were there laugh because they thought I needed to probably get the keg out of the trunk first. There were a lot of things in my life that were not in line with God. And it led to a 40 something year. Now it's 50 years as a Christian, but 45 of those years I've been in ministry. And so I started off working with the deaf. And my claim in college to fame was I was lead singer in a deaf choir. And so I was the voice while other people sang. And eventually I pastored deaf churches for about 4 years. And then I felt this overwhelming call to go to the mission field. And so I wrote the mission, said, you're going to be blessed to have me. I'm really talented. They wrote me a 7-page letter saying why I'd never go. And the biggest reason was I had no experience with hearing people. They had no way of evaluating my ministry. And so I wound up pastoring in a turnaround church in Eastern Washington, then a church that was almost past turning around in northern Idaho, and we got it going again. And eventually, God allowed my wife, my four children, and I to go to Nigeria, West Africa as missionaries. We spent a term there and then another 2 terms in South Africa, and then came back to the States, worked again online with the mission for about 10 years in 244 nations and territories telling people about Jesus. And then I was called to go to North Dakota and be the vice president of academics at a Bible college for 4 years. Then 4 years later, I got called to come back to the same place I've been serving the last 10 in Springfield, Missouri. And the nonprofit that called me had a major upset in the way that funding worked. And my first job as a brand new hire was to lay off 232 people, including my son, and cut my own salary in half. And a year later, I walked away from it so that they could balance the budget. And they're doing great these days. But it led me to this unbelievable transition. I was not looking for a change in my life, but change in my life I had. And so I began to look at how people had handled this before me. And what I noticed was there were two tracks that a person could go down. One led to a long life, and the other one led to a very short stay on earth. And I wanted the long life. I've got things to live for.
Mm.
And so I began to look at it, wrote a book about it, and then started the podcast. And now I do workshops and travel the country to tell people about how their retirement can be ignited. And these could be the best years of a person's life.
I love it. And first of all, just thank you for your service to the Lord and to all across the world to just bring people to Jesus. So appreciate all that you did on that front. And then one other thing that comes to mind as I hear parts of your story is we're not always ready for what comes next, right? And even when you get saved, right, the people were saying, well, maybe you should get some things in order before you start preaching the gospel and all that. But sometimes God's timing and how He puts us into situations, we may not feel like we're prepared. I'm even sure, like the last assignment you had before you kind of got into what you're doing now is like, what's going on here? I got to handle all these difficult situations. But that's kind of the story of life oftentimes, right? We think we might be prepared and then we realize we're not, or we don't feel like we're prepared and we're shoved into it anyway.
I think it was John Lennon who said, life is what happens when you're making other plans. And certainly for seniors, that's what happens a lot. If you're not careful, someone's making decisions for you. And there's a Foghorn Leghorn meme online right now that has Foghorn Leghorn saying, so we're going to go down to the beach and we're going to get a suntan. So I guess that's what we're doing, as though someone else had said, here's your day, enjoy it. Well, for most of us, we'd rather have a little bit of self-control over who we are and what we do, and other people telling us what that looks like. The ideal retirement is really something I need to craft with my wife and my kids in mind, of course. She's going to go along with me, but I need to actually make decisions for myself, and I need a framework in order to make good choices in this season of life.
Yeah, I love that. I think there's a lot that we can discuss in our time together today, and one of the things that you sure study the Bible a lot in your ministry and all those kind of things. And I know I've heard it said many times. I probably said it myself that you can't find the word retirement in the Bible. So when you hear someone that comes up with that is like, oh, you're kind of trying to help people with their retirement, is like, are we even supposed to do that? Or what's that look like from a biblical perspective? And obviously, we know the realities of life, right? At some point in our life, more than likely, we're just going to have to slow down because we only have a certain amount of time here on earth. So even though we may not, some people may not, I don't want to ever retire. It's going to look different no matter what.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Now, you're perfectly correct in the fact that retirement is not in the Bible. However, in Leviticus, the Levites transitioned from carrying the tabernacle to mentoring others to carry the tabernacle.
Mm.
And that's exactly the kind of transition that should define retirement, not disengaging, but changing roles. The
Mm.
first half of our lives, the first 40 plus years, we are learning and we are innovating and we are experiencing life as movers and shakers. The second part of our life, we are actually galvanizing the wisdom that we gained the first half. And then we should be becoming people who sow salt and light into younger people around us. And if we're not doing that, if we're picking up a TV remote control and watching Me TV reruns all day long and living vicariously through Andy and Opie, we are losing the best blessing of being older. And that is that older men should be investing in younger men, older women should be investing in younger women, and we should be involved, engaged, and carrying load in the local church and in the community around us.
Man, that's an amazing thoughts right there for people to consider as they're maybe they're not there yet. Because that's one of the questions. Like, when do you say 50 and above, and sometimes it's hard for people in the thick of their you know what they're doing and the calling that they have or the job or the business that they run to really do a lot of thinking about those particular years. And so for you, how do you help people that understand when's the best time to begin to looking to that so they can prepare and be ready for that?
Sure. Well, there's some financial considerations, and I recommend they see a financial professional for those things. That is not me. But there are some lifestyle and some mental mindset issues that a person has to look at, and that's my lane. And so, really, what it comes down to is this: if opportunity arises in front of you to meet a need, and you're in a position to meet it, and you don't have to have a 9 to 5 to do it, then you really ought to at least pray whether or not God's calling you to do something spectacular that you never anticipated before. And so, for me, that was becoming a dean of a Bible college at 59. And I really had not done that role ever before, although I had been in education in Africa and had been a president of a Bible college and a program director. This was a whole new thing. And I went in there with a zeal and excitement because it was the right thing to do. And then when it came time to transition out, it was the right thing to help that nonprofit. Now, I had one plan in mind, and God had another. And I think what happens a lot of times for people in their 50s is maybe it's a transition, a company is sold and they're downsizing on the flip side of that sale, and you're the one caught in the downsizing. It's not so much that you want to retire as the phone doesn't ring the moment that you're laid off. The phone has stopped ringing for a lot of people because it wisely or not, the job market doesn't have a lot of place for people 50 and over to just begin a new position. And so a lot of people find themselves unexpectedly looking at retirement. And if they don't make a plan, they're going to crash and burn. And again, it's that idea of, do I want to live 18 months or do I want to live 18, 20, 40 years after I retire?
Yeah, I think it makes you think of the idea of purpose, right? Like if someone maybe they decided to retire like when they wanted to, or like you said, they got put into that situation not on their own accord. And this idea that what are you living for? I think we've seen this play out where people they don't really have much to look forward to, so that after retirement age is maybe not as long as they maybe originally thought. So, how do you see
Sure.
that playing out with people, like what they actually look forward to doing, helping them, stay and continue to do stuff?
Well, here's where it gets scary because a lot of us set our retirement goals, our dreams, when we were in our 30s and 40s. And then you get to your 50s and 60s, and you're not the same person. You don't have the same physical capacity, you don't have the same physical strength, or maybe your health has had some issues. And so, what fit you as a younger person looking ahead, the dream
Mhm.
retirement, doesn't necessarily fit when you're actually of age to retire. And so you have to reassess things and you have to let go of certain things. I tell the story about Dave and Marge, a couple that represent many couples. And Dave looked forward to buying an RV, a fifth wheel, ever since he was a young man. And he kept up with it. He knew exactly what he wanted. Every year he'd upgrade the RV in his mind to the newest and best and greatest. And so he retires and he goes out and buys a fifth wheel for $250,000. Then he has to buy a $125,000 truck to haul it. Then he has to outfit both. And so now he's sitting at another 21K. And he and Marge jump in the RV. They head off down the highway. And the first day is great. The second day isn't too bad. But then he finds out that there's a gray water tank and a black water tank. And then he finds out that people in RV parks stand around waiting for the latecomers to see how they'll back in with a big unit into a RV spot. And people are taking pictures and laughing as Dave is trying to get this thing in there. And when I see Dave the next time, 6 months later, I ask him how that RV trip is going. And he says, "Oh, we sold that." I said, "Really, when?" He said, "About 3 weeks after we bought it." My
Mhm.
wife looked at me and said, "It's a choice. You have me or you have the RV." And so he sold it. And I said, "Well, how'd that work out?" He said, 30 cents on the dollar.
Mhm.
The dream didn't fit the reality. It's a lot of work to have that lifestyle.
Hmm.
And, Marge might have wanted a $2,000 sewing machine, and then she got arthritis in her fingers, and the sewing is going to hurt. It's not going to work out. My brother-in-law wanted 160 acres in the wilderness. Then he found out that he measures his life in distance from his cardiologist, his urologist, his renal specialist, and he can't live 160, on 160 acres, 100 miles from the nearest doctor. It just doesn't work that way. But he can have a great life.
Mm.
And so we have to reshape the dreams based on our current reality.
Yeah, that's some wisdom right there. There's something I say a lot. I probably said it, I don't know how many episodes of the 2000 Cubit Rule, but it's relevant here too. So man makes plans, but God's the one that orders the steps. So wherever you are in life, right, we can have amazing plan, vision. Those are awesome to have. But that doesn't mean it's going to play out that way. God knows. And of course, our choices factor in. It's not like he's forcing us into a lane that we don't have any say in. But yeah, those kind of things you just brought up, those are real. People have to
Well,
deal with health and financial situations, all that.
but all that said, there's no expiration date on my rather large forehead. And if you lifted your cap, there wouldn't be one under yours either. And scripture is pretty clear. We are God's handiwork created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which he prepared in advance for us to do. And I don't think he lets us off the hook the last 20 to 40 years of our lives
Right.
simply because we exit the workforce.
Mm,
What he's giving us is a whole new mission field, a whole new opportunity, a whole new chance to reinvent ourselves and to live out with a greater sense of purpose. We have resources, we have galvanized wisdom, we have time on our hands. Why are we not looking for where we can meet a need within this wonderful world of ours and make Jesus known?
amen. So the name of what I guess it's your business and the service that you provide is uh, Ignite Retirement, right? And
It
so
is.
it makes me think of that. I'm not going to retire. I'm going to refire that
Exactly
whole
right.
thing, right? And so when you think of those kind of statements and all that, yeah, it's really towards this understanding of there's continued purpose. It may look different than it was 20, 30 years ago, but even in
Right.
your own story, I'm sure you can look back and kind of see this path of how God led you and how that brought you to this place with all the different experiences and things, and how you can utilize that knowledge and those experiences to help others today. Uh, how how does that work? Like I've hear the term, and I've used it myself too, convergence as a type of thing that, like, once you kind of get all these things aligned, then God kind of amplifies and magnifies your purpose in those latter years.
Yeah, I think it's that, but that sounds so ethereal. I mean, as you were saying that whole thing about the convergence zone and whatnot, I was thinking of Twilight Zone's theme going da 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 da. Da. No, it's not like that. You take a pause and you realize that things have changed. You're no longer punching the clock. And then you ask God to uncover for you what exactly changed, because you're not clear on that unless you're really thoughtful. And you look at what's changed, and then you make some decisions about how you feel about that. Some things you're going to regret, some things you're really grateful for. Then, the next thing is you kind of reflect on the whole thing, and then you release what you can't change. I can't change the fact that I'm 67 years old. I can't change the fact that, I lived hard the first portion of my life, and I pay a price for that even now. So those are things I can't change. I got to let go of those things. But then in releasing those things, I am free then to pinpoint what he does have for me. And in pinpointing what he has for me, I get excited again because God can put a dream in someone's heart. I mean, Caleb was how old when he wanted to go back into battle? Joshua was how old when he seized the land? These are old men, but they had a zeal in their heart because God put a purpose within them. It's not so much trying to create a purpose and asking God to bless it, so much as it is uncovering the purpose he already gave you and walking in it. So then you observe who's doing it well. And you become like those people by surrounding yourself with them. And then in that, then you're elevating yourself from the typical retiree who just begins to get old, crabby, and yells, "Get off my lawn." And you're actually engaging the world around you, and you're doing it with a gift set that no one else around you has, with a generosity that only age can provide you.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the idea of mentorship as you've begin to talk about these kind of things, like looking around to see how you can help at that stage of life. And to me, we've talked a lot about discipleship as well as a part of what we do here, and there's some parallels to that, right? Making disciples and have being a mentor and all that. So how would you? When you're working with people, is that something that you point out as like, hey, look for those opportunities, or how do you see mentorship for those that are in the retirement phase of life, and how that should, work in where they are and who they have in their life?
Sure. Well, generally speaking, the best way to mentor is to find a need that isn't being met and then find out why it's not being met. Now, there could be a lot of different reasons, but I mean, in my case, when I wasn't at the nonprofit any longer, I realized I had a chance to pastor an international church. Now, I'm doing it for passion, I'm not doing it for career. It's not going to add another line to my resume in any way, shape, or form. But in that church, I have a worship leader who's my age, who's training up a young worship team. I'm working with a young pastor who's working with other young people, and I'm mentoring him, he's mentoring them, and together we're building a large and exciting international church in a day and age when, it's pretty hard to be an international in America. And so God's prospering the church in the midst of some very uh, turbulent waters. And these are people who are here legally. They spent years trying to get here. One family in the church spent half their lives in a refugee camp. We've worked with people who don't come to the church because they're Muslim, but they need the church because they're alone. And in showing the love of Christ, then the person who's working with me learns the love of Christ. That's what mentorship really is. And so we've built some incredible relationships in doing that. And in the meantime, I get to say, well, God, that was quite the day. I didn't see all that coming, but wow, what a thing you did today here. And I get to be a part of this. And, there's just this excitement. So it's usually in a need that's being left unmet that mentorship is most welcome. Because if God's put it on your heart to do it, then God's also put it on the heart of someone younger than you to carry it. And your job is to equip them and to enable them to mature into the position, and then you step back and support them in it. And so my associate pastor will become the senior pastor, and I'll become his associate one of these days soon. And it's the plan of God. America is in desperate need of people in ministry, for example. In 2 years, maybe three, half of the churches in America will be without a pastor because of so much gray hair.
Mm.
And there's no one standing in line to take those churches. Well, an older believer who maybe dodged a call when they were younger can actually step in right now and help out to keep churches open while God raises up younger leaders, and might even be able to raise that younger leader up themselves.
Yeah, that's amazing. Those thoughts and just the idea of, yeah, where's the unmet need that, and you don't have to wait till retirement, right? You can be doing those kind of things in the here and now if you're in those early years. Like there's always someone that you can lead that you've gone a little bit farther than. And so that's something to look forward to, right? Where's that next unmet need that God's put in your heart? So uh, thanks for bringing that to our attention. One of the things I was thinking about is when people come to you and they're like, "Yeah, I need help in this area of igniting my retirement season of life." Like, how's that typically start out as an initial engagement, and what are you typically doing to work with them or help with them on this journey?
It's kind of funny because I have a large Facebook group, and people will see the podcast coming out every week announced there, or they'll see it on LinkedIn, or they'll see it on YouTube, and they'll come to me and say, "Well, you just seem like you're happier than ever and busier than ever." And My response is generally, well, yeah, but I'm only working on the things that I love and appreciate. I have only passion projects.
Hmm.
And so I run a nonprofit, I pastor the church, I do the podcast and then workshops, but everything I'm doing gets me up in the morning. Everything I'm doing takes the place of a 9 to 5. Everything I'm doing takes the place of having a name tag that told me what my identity was. And when I begin to talk to them about that, well, they say, well, I'd sure love to have that. And my response is, well, why can't you have it?
Hmm.
Maybe if you don't have it, it's because there's no one showing you how. Can I show you how? And, truthfully, it's working. I mean, people are getting excited about the podcast, the blog posts, the notes, the communities online, the YouTube. And my response is, well, it has nothing to do with me. It has to do with the fact that we all have this hunger to be significant and to please God in our lives. And that doesn't go away when we stop punching a clock.
I got your website here, igniteretirement.co. So no N,
Yes.
folks. You can check that out. It'll be in the description as well. And it's right here. It says retirement isn't the end of significance. It's the beginning of what you are actually built for. Kind of unpack that a little bit more. We've been talking a little bit about that, but that's kind of fascinating to me, right? Like you've gotten to this point. This is where it really starts.
Well, John was an older man when he wrote a good portion of the Old Testament or New Testament. Moses was 80 years old when he began to lead Israel. Joshua was 80 years old when he took the land. I mean, if you stop and think about where God shows age, he reveres it. And, young people today, the ones 18 to 25, actually have a different view of older people than most of us recognize. They are absolutely interested in having older people take an interest in them. So it's different than prior generations. I certainly didn't feel that way necessarily when I was a 16-year-old boy, but times have changed, and the kids today are interested in having someone who survived life tell them how to do it. So, there's just opportunity after opportunity. And frankly, I think the desire of God is that we would glorify him every day of our lives, not just during a working career. And, I'm part of a huge demographic, and you're just right on the tail of it. If you're turning 50 in the next year or two, you're right on the tail of this huge mass of America that are aging out. Well, I'd rather see us age in, and I'd rather see us take on new responsibilities and help others to be elevated and, go farther in their lives. I will give you one secret, though, and I don't do this often. I'll tell you that this material, the things that I'm teaching, they actually work for any transition at any stage in life. I just was looking at where is the biggest population that needs this right now, and that was in my own peer group.
Yeah, there you go. You were the right man for the right time. It sounds like I wanted to go ahead and share this website, so we'll look through it real quick as well. And if there's anything that you want to draw our attention to, we'll check that out as well. Let me go ahead and
Hmm.
pull that right now. All right, so here it is. It's the igniteretirement.co, as we mentioned before. And like you mentioned before, there is a community that people can join. So you got
Right.
some different things about that down here on the website as well.
Yeah, one of the things that's coming up is Substack community is growing right now. That's where I'm posting the podcast every week, and then from
Mhm.
there it goes out to the other sites. And so there's a Substack area that people can go to and see what's going on. I post notes there every day, trying to give different insights. But we're also building the site here, and this will actually have a bot probably in a week or so that will give answers to people's questions about retirement. And it is going to be built entirely on the writing and the book that I did, the what I'm doing, and the podcast material that I've done over the last year plus, so that a person can get an answer as though they were sitting and talking to me. And the goal is to equip people. The goal isn't to build a business per se, but to actually equip people to say, "Hey, let's not get put out to pasture." The word you have highlighted there. Let's do something that's going to make a difference in this time. And so, igniteretirement.co. I'm on Facebook with Ignite Retirement. I'm on YouTube with Ignite Retirement, and I'm Substack at Ignite Retirement. So it's pretty consistent all the way across.
Yeah, of course, I highlighted that because sheep feast and the flocks that we talk about in our own business. And one of the things that came to mind as I thought about that is often when you look at a group of sheep, you will have an older sheep that will help lead the younger sheep because they know what the process is, right? They've been there and done that before. Like whether it's like, hey, here's where the food is, and this is all that. And so it shows up in nature, right, over and over again, how these kind of general ideas and thoughts are out there. What's the shift? Is that yeah, we already talked about that? Kind of, I
Yeah, I
saw that and
think
it made me think, what's that?
well, I think what we have to understand is that our mindset is built around the finance when it comes to retirement. And we're actually wanting people to realize that there's so much more to retirement than money. You actually have to know why you saved. You have to know why you resourced for your old age. You have to know where generosity fits in. You have to know where leaving something for your children fits in. Not the how to get there, but now that you're there, what are you going to do about this? And so there's a mindset shift that has to take place from accumulation to distribution mindset. And how do I want this to be divided out in these last years of my life? And so I want to maintain something for my children, but I want to be able to be generous. I want to be able to be, a kingdom factor in these days and live a life of significance and be the answer to someone's prayer, not because I provided, but because God provided. And He used stewardship on my end of things to be a part of things that He was already doing. And so I think there's a lot of mindset that has to change, and we can be that change, not just by receiving a new mindset ourselves, but by sharing that mindset with others.
Yes, sir. Something that came to mind as you mentioned about, leaving something for your children and not just like, okay, there's a financial piece of that, of course. And then there's beyond that, right? Your spiritual inheritance and things of that nature. And one of the things that was brought back to my attention recently was the concept of redigging your father's wells. And we know
Hmm.
that's an Old Testament story there that Jacob's wells were covered up at some point, and then the next generation or generations to follow found those wells and you redig them. And you hear that in spiritual circles sometimes. I was wondering if you had any thoughts around those as it concerns passing along generational knowledge and those sort of things.
Yeah, I absolutely do. I talk a lot about storytelling, and I talk a lot about, sharing my experiences, and I share the experiences of my in-laws, my mother and father, with my children and grandchildren. I try to get them to understand they came from somewhere, and that a lot of where they came from was hard work and difficult times, and people survived. And when you stop and think about the circumstances kids are growing up in and young adults are facing right now, I bought my first house when I was 23. I have kids that may not buy a house until they're in their 40s because the property market, everything has changed so much. But I did know hard times and I did know difficult circumstances. And sometimes, if you don't explain where you came from, everybody believes that you just always had it easy and they're expecting an easy journey themselves. And, kids getting married want to start where their parents are now, not where their parents began when we used FedEx boxes as furniture in our first apartment, those types of things. And when they suddenly realize the journey that we were on, then their journey seems more normal. Their journey seems more like a God thing than an interruption to a God thing. And I think that, telling about the spiritual heritage of my family, my wife's family has been a believing family for 5 generations. I was in the first generation of believers on my side. And, there's a difference and our kids are beneficiaries of both, what was learned from both. And I want them to understand where they came from so they have a better understanding of where God's possibly going to be taking them.
Yeah, super powerful thoughts. And the The fact of the matter is, we don't all come from, the Christian background. I was blessed to have maybe similar to what your wife, like many generations of believers. But that's the cool thing. You got to establish the heritage, right? And now you're walking forward with your children, and they have that to build on, which is exciting stuff. And every generation has that opportunity, to start something new or to build on what's already been established. And that's a powerful thing. And I want to make sure people avail themselves to your resources. Once again, igniteretirement.co. And I think if you just search that Ignite Retirement, you're going to find a lot of Bill Hennessy out there. So you can do that on Google, I'm sure, or YouTube and the different places. And also, Bill, we want to make sure that you have the final word of encouragement for those that are listening in and watching today. So, yeah, we want to throw that back to you here shortly. But yeah, this is something that I think a lot of people don't always want to think about, right? Because it's like, oh, that's the end of my life. And, they want to live in the moment, right? But there is the wisdom of planning ahead. The Bible has plenty to say about that. So as believers, we also need to engage in what God's future holds for us, not just I'm in the middle of my career. I want another raise or another business and all that. But what does the last chapter look like, and how can they be as impactful as possible? So I thank you, Bill, for sharing about this and having a community and resource around it that can help the body of Christ really lean into that and, yeah, have the most successful part of their life right before they meet Jesus, which is pretty exciting. So, Bill, what else would you like to just encourage folks with as we wrap our time today?
Let's put it into perspective. My in-laws retired when he was 65 and she was 63. He lived to 91 and she lived to 103. If life was over when he hung up his hard hat at Boeing at 65, then what were the last 3 decades or four? I think we need to realize that there is so much more to life than career. There's so much more to life than being young. The ability to be older and appreciate the strengths that we have and the gifts that we can give away. That's what brings pleasure to God. And I want to walk in such a way that I sense God's pleasure. I want to walk in such a way that I haven't hung up my hat before God was done with me. I want to walk in a way that says, hey, God, hold on just for a second. Let me finish this up before you call me home, because I want to finish well so that I can hear him say, well done, good and faithful servant. So I'm not looking ahead to death. I'm looking ahead to tomorrow and saying there's still a work for me to do. And as long as there is, I will have life.
Amen. All right, Bill. That's a great way to end our time today. And once again, thank you for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your experience with us. And hey, folks, you're watching, like, share, comment, get this stuff out. There's a lot of folks that need to hear this message. Be encouraged, be inspired, be challenged to continue the good fight to finish the race well. And so, Bill, thanks again for being with us.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. Thanks for being a part of the 2000 Cubit Rule. We'll see you next time. Be blessed.